Good evening, you're watching No Spin. I'm Nidhi Razdan. The Indian rupee has been in a tailspin for some time now, but today it touched the 80 rupee mark to the dollar for the very first time ever, breaching a crucial psychological mark as well. This is largely more bad news for the economy and for all of us, because when the rupee falls, everything that India imports, particularly imports of fuel, gas, all of that becomes more expensive. Don't forget that India imports over 80% of its crude oil requirements, and that in turn increases inflation at home. Students going to America to study will find it much more expensive now, and so will travelers. It's already been happening. The only real upside is that exporters do make gains, since a falling rupee makes India's products more competitive. Now, all of this is happening when the GST has gone up on so many essential items from oil to atta. And today, we need to look at whether, at the end of the day, as the politicians bicker about who's at fault, whether you and I, the common man, ends up suffering. Joining us first on the program tonight is India's former finance minister and senior Congress leader, Mr. P. Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram, thank you for joining us. In very simple terms, what are the consequences for the Aam Aadmi when the rupee falls in the way that it has?
Well, the straight consequence, the direct consequences, prices will increase. We are deficient in many goods and many commodities, and therefore our import bill is always higher than our export bill, and imports will be costlier. So straight away it will impact prices, it will impact inflation.
But
when fuel prices increase, it has a chain effect, because fuel is the determining factor in practically every activity today. And fuel prices will increase: petrol, diesel, aviation fuel, gas, everything will increase. And therefore, the direct, immediate consequence will be an increase in prices.
Do you believe the government could have done anything about this, Mr. Chidambaram? Because we've been seeing this weakening of the rupee for some time. There are various factors at play here, including, what's happening globally. So how much of this do you believe is in the control of the government here?
Well, government and RBI are equally responsible for maintaining price stability. One can't point to the other. In my view, the RBI did enough, but it did it too late. RBI should have increased interest rates at least 2 to 3 months earlier than it did. So RBI did enough, but it did it too late. The government did nothing. In fact, the government has done graver damage by increasing the GST rates effective today. The government did nothing to control the current account deficit, nothing to control the fiscal deficit, nothing to boost exports, nothing to contain imports, except, of course, levying taxes and maybe some moderation in imports. And worst of all, it has increased the GST rates. So government is doing everything which contradicts what the RBI is doing.
Mr. Chidambaram, however, the finance minister has hit back today, and she has made the point that, the opposition, ministers were part of the GST Council meetings that took these decisions on raising the GST rates for certain items, including certain essential items, and therefore they were party to those decisions. How would you respond to that?
How do we know that? The West Bengal minister just now disclosed it was a virtual meeting. And she says at the meeting, she opposed the GST rate increases. Now, why should I believe the Union Finance Minister and not believe the West Bengal minister? Is there any written document? Have they signed any statement? So this is word against word. And remember, until 2 days ago, the finance ministry was putting out that it was a unanimous decision. But now they have corrected it. And since yesterday, in both written expressions and oral expressions, they are using the word consensus. So there's a vast difference between a unanimous decision and a consensus decision. And at a virtual meeting, but why didn't you call a physical meeting so that ministers can meet face to face, ask each other questions, and decide this very vital matter? See, there are two aspects to the GST rate increases. We are all focusing on one. One is whether it was right to increase the rates on a number of goods of mass consumption. Leave that aside. The second is timing. Is this the time to raise GST rates when retail inflation is over 7%, when wholesale price inflation is over 15%, when the rupee is falling and therefore it will make imports costlier and it will impact prices? Is this the time to increase GST rates?
Interestingly, as I was seeing all of this happening at a time when The Economist just came out with its crony capitalism index, Mr. Chidambaram, of 2021, where, it's ranked countries based, on the billionaire wealth as a percentage of GDP, and they're looking at crony capitalism in particular. India has actually, its share of billionaire wealth derived from crony sectors has risen from 29 to 43% in the last 6 years. Is that a telling figure to you?
That's the only index in which India seems to be rising. Hunger index, nutrition index, in every other index, India is falling. On press freedom index, liberty index, we are falling. This is the only index we are rising. Do you require a magnifying glass to examine the sore on your palm? I'm translating roughly a Tamil proverb. It is absolutely clear that this government is pro-capitalist and a few capitalists. They are they are crony capitalists. Practically everything is going to these crony capitalists. There will be a rise in the number of billionaires, and I don't regret that. But these billionaires are being encouraged and created and allowed to become fatter and fatter billionaires by crony capitalist policies of the government.
Finally, though, coming back to the point on the rupee, Mr. Chidambaram, if you had a piece of advice for the government today, what would it be? What can they do to stem its further fall?
All of you are very optimistic that government listens to advice. I've told your show, the government listens to nothing, nobody's advice. I'm willing to write to you a private letter and you give it as your advice to the finance minister. And she may accept it, but certainly she won't accept any advice coming from me. The first thing the government should do is to acknowledge the reality. You have to acknowledge it. You have to accept that there is a serious issue about inflation. There is a serious issue about unemployment. The serious issue about depreciating rupee. You have to acknowledge this. Once you acknowledge this, then you can look at remedial measures. Remember, 2013, we were in exactly the same situation. There was raging inflation and the rupee had fallen from 59 to 68. But within about 4 to 5 months, did we not bring back the rupee to 59? Did we not contain inflation? Did we not boost the GDP growth rate in the last year of UPA government from 5.1 to 6.9? It's doable. It may be contextually different. Some things have to be done, some things have to be changed, but it's doable provided you acknowledge that there is a problem and you invite suggestions.
However, there is an argument that some in the government are giving about the rupee, which is that it's actually strengthened against the British pound, against the euro. It's the dollar with which it's weakened. Why is that happening, you think?
What kind of satisfaction is this? Our rupee is stronger against the Sri Lankan rupee. Do you want to gloat about it? Look at our trade basket. What proportion of our trade, import and export, is denominated in dollars? Please ask the government after this interview is over. Please ring up them and ask them what proportion according to me, according to my recollection, and I may be wrong by a few percentage points, over 80% of our trade basket is denominated in dollars. So what is the pleasure you get by saying my rupee is appreciated against this currency, that currency? As long as it depreciates against the dollar and massively depreciates against the dollar, and if your trade basket is 80% denominated in dollar, then the only thing that matters is the rupee-dollar parity. What else matters, tell me?
So finally, if you had a prediction to make, do you think that we could be looking at 82 rupees to a dollar? That's what some experts are predicting, and they say it could happen soon.
I am not a soothsayer or with the kind of foresight which Mr. Narendra Modi and the late Ms. Sushma Swaraj had in 2013-14. Remember what they said? If we come to power, the rupee will come back to 40 rupees a dollar. Thankfully, after they came to power, they abandoned that completely bizarre idea. I can't predict, but all I can say is it will get worse before it gets better. It's quite possible that the rupee will depreciate a little more before it can be stemmed. But I can't see the 80 rupee to a dollar coming back to 70 rupees a dollar, which was there even a few months ago, very quickly, because I don't see this government looking at measures.
All right, Mr. Chidambaram, cautious words from you there. Thank you for joining us on NDTV this evening. As you said, you expect things to get worse before they get better.